Its contribution is entitled Managing Natural Disaster in Historical Areas, a novel holistic seismic risk assessment method applied to a relevant case study. In urban areas, the path network plays a key role in emergency, ensuring the connection between the different areas of the city. It is firstly relevant in the evacuation process when people try to move along paths with dangers due to the built environment damages. It is also relevant for rescue action, such as the support to trapped people and to evacuees who can reach a safe area. Historic city centers are characterized by critical risk-increasing features. Narrow streets are surrounded by high buildings. They can be used by both vehicles and pedestrians, increasing the presence of obstacles to motion. Plano-altimetric variation can increase the complexity of the urban layout, while the presence of underground elements, such as hypogeum, include additional vulnerability and the possibility to intrinsic damage to streets and squares. Vulnerability due to poor condition of infrastructure and cascading phenomena, such as landslide, is combined to the high vulnerability of masonry buildings facing the street and the square. Historic cities attract tourists and visitors who can be not familiar with the urban spaces and emergency procedures. These features are critical if the scenario is located in a risk-prone area. In this sense, earthquakes surely represent one of the most challenging disasters in the overall context. Anyway, limitation to current methods for risk assessment and reduction of path exist. They do not generally fit with the historical context by mainly limiting the analysis of risk due to buildings on the open spaces. In fact, they just prefer simple geometrical rules to building vulnerability analysis. Risk assessment results are marginally used to plan risk reduction intervention, including evacuation path, and finally, rapid and holistic methods are needed too. To overcome these limits, this work promotes a holistic and quick-to-apply methodology for seismic risk assessment of urban paths in historical scenarios. It can support safety designers in punctually understand which factor mainly affects safety of evacuees and rescuers along the path. On such basis, they can plan proactive risk reduction strategies such as the intervention on buildings and also design evacuation plan by using, for instance, safety path choices, leading to efficient rescue operation management. To this end, this work adopts an existing path risk index method developed by Quagliarini et al. The method will be shown in the following. This method is applied to a relevant case study to demonstrate the method capabilities. The method by Quagliarini et al. Relies on the typical elements composing a urban path network. Firstly, the nodes are punctual elements such as crossroads, significant plano-altimetric variation in the layout, and adjacencies to the urban area. Squares are aerial open spaces, and dense surface increases the possibility to use them as assembly points where evacuees gather and wait for rescuers. Links and squares are connected by links that are linear open spaces, while the nodes are the limits of the path. Squares and links are the effective elements composing the path network, and the index assesses their risk. The path risk index for a square or a link is then based on the following elements. The hazard firstly comprises the local features of the soil that can affect the path damage. Thus, it is considered through the design ground acceleration relating to each seismic zone where the historic center is placed, and to the ground types. Higher the ground acceleration or the local amplification values due to the ground types, higher will be the risk. Concerning geometrical features, the length of the open space could affect the travel time, while its width can influence the evacuation flow. So, longer and narrower the space, higher will be the risk. The physical and structural features of the path are related to the condition of the open space itself, its underground, and the presence of infrastructural elements that can provoke possible damages during the emergency. We can talk about a potential slide down of soil and the related preventive measure if present, the presence and state of conservation of other interfering infrastructure such as bridges or tunnels, the different surface typology and their condition by using different kind of pavements, and the underground's presence above the street or the square that can lead to local collapses. More complex the path condition and interferences, higher will be the risk. Intrinsic vulnerability considers the facing building and their damage during an earthquake. The formula shown in this slide is based on the vulnerability index of Lago Martino, VI, and show VI is multiplied by the ratio between the building size, Li, and the path or link length, Lp. Higher the building vulnerability, higher will be the risk. Exposure requires the use of path in terms of traffic, motion direction, carriageways and vehicle and people quantification. We can include street, square, pedestrian areas with single and multiple direction. The user analysis includes the average pedestrian flow and their typologies, for instance elderly, adults, children. Such data can also vary over the time due to the use condition of each open space and of the hosted activities. Exposure inquires the use of the path and the presence of people. In this sense, it can be classified depending on its traffic and motion direction. We can distinguish between streets, squares, pedestrian areas with single and multiple directions. It also includes the carriageways and vehicle quantification, and moreover it can comprise the quantity and quality of users that can use the path by including the average pedestrian flows and the user typologies such as elderly, adults, children. We have different vulnerability to the earthquake. Such data can also vary over the time due to the use condition of each open space and of the hosted activities. Then, more critical and complex will be the condition for higher flows or more vulnerable users, higher will be the risk. The last factor comprises the state condition. Urban streets could be partially or totally obstructed in case of temporary installation. This term defines who can use the path, for instance pedestrians or vehicles of rescuers, or even the path is blocked because of the installation. In this sense, this term can vary over the time. The analytical hierarchy process and the multi-criteria decision-making methods are used to combine the factors depending on their importance. Firstly, the path network is characterized in terms of who can use the path, according to the state condition. The factors are combined into the path risk. Each factor is associated with a condition, which can vary on the related features. Each factor is associated to a different weight as a function of its importance in respect to the others. The weights are calculated according to the SATIS methods, which adopts a pairwise comparison. The weights are validated if the overall consistency ratio is under the 10%. Three most important features relate to physical and structural ones, hazard, and then extrinsic vulnerability as shown by the slide. They can directly damage the path surface and area and thus hinder the evacuation and rescue access. The risk index is calculated as a linear combination of the factors. It ranges from 0 to 1 as the maximum risk and can be expressed in percentage terms. The risk index is then represented on risk map showing the importance of a link or square to define risk reduction intervention and priority. This method is applied to the historic city center of Sulmona in Italy as a case study. Sulmona is affected by a very high hazard. The figure on the top right shows that the maximum historical macroseismic intensity is equal to 10. Sulmona has also a very compact urban fabric and paths face vulnerable buildings, especially masonry and precode ones. The high exposure of the whole city center is relevant especially in the area shown by the map on the left. The city center is characterized by a center-wide square, as marked in red on the left. It can attract evacuees from the surroundings, and it can also host up to 10,000 people in case of mass gatherings. The research is focused on the blue area of the map, which is interconnected to these critical elements of the path network. The results for the case study application are now shown. Firstly, the elements composing the path network are identified in this figure. Access nodes to the area are marked in green, and the central square is also shown in red. Three main path directions exist, as marked in blue in the figure, connecting the accesses to the central square. About state condition, all the paths can both guarantee the pedestrian evacuation and rescue vehicle access. The area is included in the same seismic zone, having the same hazard. This map overlaps the path network with the data on buildings vulnerability according to the Lago Martino's methods. Similar extrinsic vulnerability can be generally noticed, and longer paths will be more vulnerable than the others. Anyway, squares f and g could have a mitigation impact on the long path marked in blue because of their increased width in respect to the surrounding links. About exposure, square D is influenced by mass gatherings. As said in the case study description, it has a general lower risk and it can host population but only in case of no mass gatherings. The figure also marks in blue the shortest path to square D for rescuers such as it needs intervention for vulnerability reduction according to the building feature shown in the map. Differences due to the exposure can be noticed indeed. The red dashed area hosts a larger number of activities in respect to the green dashed areas, as shown by the blue activity icons on the figures from Google Street Views. Then higher user flows and number as expected. Finally, similar conditions are noticed for physical and structural features and for the geometrical features. According to the above, the map resumes the risk of link and square in the areas, according to different colors given on the left. Long path hosted by links combines higher extrinsic vulnerability to exposure and geometrical features. Besides the effects of exposure on square D, the smaller squares A, B, C, and G have a lower exposure but a significant impact of buildings' vulnerability. On the contrary, square F shows a lower risk due to the very low vulnerability of the facing buildings. Although similar path risk in the ranges can be seen because of the basic feature similarities, differences of the related factors suggest different risk reduction intervention by characterizing three main areas. The first area of intervention regards square F, which attracts evacuees from the surrounding because of its lower risk. Due to the lower extrinsic vulnerability, it can be used as a temporary gathering area. But wayfinding signs should mark its use to the evacuee to properly collect them from the connected links. Besides traditional signs, integrated floors or street furniture can be applied. The self-electrically illuminated elements point at the square direction during the emergency. Personal device maps can be also available online before the emergency to increase the evacuee's awareness. Links 1 to 9 and square B are affected by critical length and extrinsic vulnerability, so buildings retrofitting is needed, especially near square B, to increase the possibility to reach nodes 1 and 2. Meanwhile, wayfinding signs, as shown before, can be implemented along the open spaces to guide people toward the safe areas of nodes 1 and 2 that are the access node to the city center. Finally, the area near square D seems to be the most relevant in the whole urban fabric, as discussed before, because of its proximity to an access. Square D is the reference gathering area for evacuee, both in case or not of mass gatherings. Then intervention for building vulnerability reduction to ensure rescue access from node 14 and pedestrians evacuation should be guaranteed. In this sense, only few buildings, marked in red in the figure, should be retrofitted at first. Both these interventions are aimed at improving the use condition of the square D and of the related link from the access node. It can be a very important path for rescuers because this is the shortest path to the center of the assessed area and to the most attractive area inside the city center. In conclusion, this work shows the application of a novel risk assessment method for urban path network in historic area. It supports the analysis of path for pedestrian evacuation and rescue action. It adopts a rapid but holistic method for quick but reliable urban scale application. In this sense, it can provide evaluation tools for scenario assessment to suggest where directing the risk reduction intervention and resources following an order of priority. It also provides emergency planning support for each linked square in the urban path network. The demonstration on a relevant case study encourages application also by local authorities towards risk awareness and reduction. In this sense, next research steps will move towards a GIS-oriented implementation of the methods into an easy-to-apply use tool. Possible integration with human behavioral-based simulation model for loss assessment and evacuation analysis can be also integrated in the method. Finally, the approach can be also easily adapted to other kinds of natural disaster by pursuing the same holistic approach. including both sudden onset disasters and slow onset disasters, depending on their related specific factors. Thank you for your attention.